Okay, so first step, you're going to get the blender. You're going to get some water. I had some leftover handmade paper water. Oops. I had some leftover paper water that some kids were making some handmade paper out of. So you're just going to pour that into the blender. Excuse my very messy sink. You get too old and you stop bothering with cleaning everything super well. All right, so after you get like a half thing of water, then what you're going to do is put it back on the blender. Get out of your bucket of soaked paper, which you don't have to soak your paper. It is okay just to like do it like straight on, so like you can just shred your paper into the blender. I just find that it's a little easier on the blender. So if you get like maybe about half a cup of shredded paper, pour it in there. It's good to get a little extra water in there, and then you can blend however much your blender can take. My blender is like a really cheap blender, so I can't blend too much. So I'm just gonna get a little bit extra water and paper to put in there. Know the limits of your blender. Make sure you don't overpower it, otherwise you're going to burn it out, and that would not be cool. So once you get a reasonable amount of paper and stuff to it, then you're just going to put the lid on it and just blend it. So. I've muted the blender for your viewing pleasure because it's really loud. So whenever you're blending, you just want to listen to your blender. If it sounds like it's like making an angry noise, it's probably got too much paper in it, so you'll need to turn off the blender and then remove some of the paper. All right, so while that's blending, I'm going to show you what you do afterwards. So you pour it into this strainer. A cheesecloth would work, anything works, as long as you can push on it gently and the water will pass through, but the clay will not. So I just kind of built this myself, and then you just push all the water out until you get it to where it can start forming a ball of paper clay. And it's going to start looking kind of like this. You want to squeeze out as much water as you can without making it super, super dry. So here you can see me kind of squishing it. The general rule of thumb is that you want to be able to squeeze it and it still be damp, but you don't want to be like gushing out water when you squeeze it. All right, and then you just put it in the bucket and then remove any small pieces, and then you'll be ready for the next set. So if I'm making a class set for my class, if I don't really have a whole lot of time to let them make it, then I'll just have a chain going. So I'll just kind of do this. This is kind of the paper pulp consistency you want. If you see any like large chunks, you either want to remove them or blend it a little bit longer. You just pour it into the mesh, which, by the way, there's a water catch under that bucket, so I'm not just pouring it. And then you just repeat the process all over again. Now you're just going to get like a bucket or some sort of container, and then you're just going to break the clay down into smaller pieces. I usually tell them kind of like wiggle your fingers around on the inside until you can break it up into small, small chunks. And then afterwards, you're ready to start adding the stuff. So I like to add just like glue. I use school glue, though it's like the cheapest, and it's washable, so it's not going to ruin anything. And then you're also going to add the cornstarch. So the ratio of glue to cornstarch depends on how smooth you want your clay. When you get ready to blend it, you're going to use kind of like a twisting, grippy motion in order to blend the clay. You just want to make sure that you work the glue and the cornstarch into the clay fibers. And so it should look kind of like this. If it's looking like this, you probably need more cornstarch. You want to make it to where whenever you pick it up, it feels like a ball of clay. So if it's too dry, you want to add more glue. If it's too sticky and it's just like on your hands and it's not coming off, you need to add more cornstarch. If you want a really smooth clay, add more glue and cornstarch. If you want kind of more of a papery texture clay, add just a little bit, enough to make it to where it turns into actual clay. So, but yeah, so the ratio, just kind of experiment. The kids love making this, and so that's what you do for like smaller groups. Here what I'm doing is I do like a sacrifice table if I'm making like a large group. So this is about, I don't even know how much paper, but this is enough for like about 50 kids for their clay project, as long as they're making like smaller clay sculptures. So here you can see I'm just adding glue and cornstarch. So I think it's probably about, maybe if you have 1 cup of paper clay, it's like a quarter cup of glue and maybe a cup of cornstarch, maybe. I don't know. Experiment with your things. I always just go by feel, I guess. It's like grandma's cooking. But yeah, so here I'm just like adding glue and wedging it. Now I wanted a smoother clay, so I'm adding more glue and cornstarch than I normally would, just because I wanted to make it more doughy like. So essentially it's exactly how you would make like pizza dough, I guess, or bun dough. Afterwards, I wrap it in plastic because it is air dry, and then I just start sectioning off into pieces. And this is about how much that it yields. So it yields quite a bit. They're good sized chunks because we're going to be building an armature with it. You're just going to need enough clay to go around the shell. So as long as you don't let them build too big of an armature, this amount should be enough for one student. And that one, which it's probably at least like 30 balls of clay, so you can make quite a bit. So all that yielded about this much clay, which is enough for several classes of students. This is what that paper clay looks like on its armature. This armature has tinfoil and wire on it, but you can use just tinfoil or you can use paper, it doesn't matter. But I used like half of one of those balls to create this. And because all you do is you just smooth the clay over the armature, so it's like putting butter on toast. And it works pretty well and it lasts a while. And it's extremely strong clay, so it's not going to be super breakable if they drop it, unless it's super, super tiny, then it's not going to break. So yeah, and then afterwards, if you used white paper, you can just color it with watercolor. If not, you just paint it with some acrylics, and there you go. If you have any questions, let me know.